Evening. Can you hear me? Barely? Okay. Mike, testing mic. Thank you. My name is Jim Kratsis. Welcome to the Gerald Ford Museum. I'm the deputy director here. I would ask for everyone's convenience if you would turn off your cell phone before we start. And first, can you believe this weather? In the 22 years I've been in Michigan, I don't think I've seen less than 4 feet of snow on the ground at this time of year. This is amazing. In fact, I was joking with Barty Allen a little while ago. I played 18 holes last Saturday. So, yes, I'm a little goofy, but anyway. This is a special night, and we have some very special people here with us. First, I want to recognize the executive director of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation, Joe Calvaruso, and his wife Donna. The Ford Presidential Foundation is a wonderful partner to the library and museum, supporting all of our public programs, our feature exhibits, education initiatives, marketing, and internships. On behalf of the museum, I wish to thank Joe and the foundation for all they do. Also with us tonight are Mary Altman and Travis Hill of the World Golf Hall of Fame. Our museum's been working with the Golf Hall of Fame for some 2 years now, I believe, to bring the Bob Hope exhibit here to Grand Rapids. And Mary, Travis, thank you for being here tonight. Tonight's opening of Bob Hope, An American Treasure, is an insightful look into a remarkable man. Bob Hope was not only America's greatest entertainer, but also one of our nation's greatest public servants. He brought his shows to our servicemen who were stationed all across the globe. These young soldiers, far from home and facing the grim realities of war, were offered a well-deserved respite, a time to laugh and forget their fears. A slice of home was brought to these far-off lands and remote locations by this great American. Bob Hope was also the friend of professional golfers, athletes, all of Hollywood, and presidents. In September of 1981, this singular icon of America came to this very museum to take part in the festivities surrounding the dedication of this institution. He came because Bob Hope and Gerald Ford had a lasting friendship that had endured for decades. They also shared a passion for the game of golf. These two world-renowned men were frequently paired together in charity events, raising millions of dollars for so many worthy causes. They also found themselves pitted against each other on the links out of public view, where maybe a few dollars on a Nassau wager might have changed hands on the 18th green. Apparently the matches were often close, but in one area, President Ford found himself at a severe disadvantage. Ford's good friend could never refrain at poking fun at the president's golf game. Hope once said that Ford was the only golfer he knew that could lose a ball in a ball washer. And after a highly publicized tee shot by Ford that hit a spectator, Bob Hope stated his favorite foursome would have been himself, President Ford, a medic, and a faith healer. There was something else these two men shared: long marriages and loving and supportive spouses who were also best of friends. Dolores and Bob Hope were married for over 69 years, a record for Hollywood longevity, not the stuff of Entertainment Tonight or TMZ. In our last of our permanent exhibits upstairs, you can see Mrs. Hope talk about her relationship her friendship, and her admiration of Mrs. Ford. Now I'd like to introduce Jack Peter of the World Golf Hall of Fame, who will set the stage for Zach Hope's talk. At the end of Mr. Hope's talk, he will be fielding questions from all of you, and you can fill out your cards, and I'll run around and collect them for you, and our director, Elaine Didier, will ask them. Jack Peter heads the World Golf Hall of Fame, an initiative of the World Golf Foundation, dedicated to celebrating and recognizing the game's great players and contributors. As the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Jack is responsible for the Hall's strategic planning and guidance of its marketing, communications, public relations, television initiatives, operations, and exhibit development. Jack, this sounds like too much for you. Maybe you need me to come down for about 6 months out of the year to help you out. That is the winner. Jack is a native of Chicago. He graduated from Loyola University, and he lives with his wife in Ponte Vedra, Beach, Florida. And my pleasure to welcome Jack Peters.
Well, thank you, Jim. Ponte Vedra Beach, for those of you that have never been there. It is truly a pleasure to be here tonight. Being from Chicago, I can tell you that this weather is fantastic, isn't it? I packed all of my wool sweaters, and I'm not going to need them. I'm really happy about that. But again, on behalf of the Hall of Fame and Museum, I want to thank Jim, I want to thank Elaine and the entire team here at the museum for the opportunity to showcase, excuse me, truly one of America's national treasures. You have a wonderful facility here. Being in the museum business, I had a chance to walk around earlier today, and you folks should be very proud of what you have here in Grand Rapids. It is a very special, unique experience for the guest, and it's obvious that there are a lot of love, a lot of care, and a lot of commitment went into building this entire facility. So again, I want to thank everybody for their gracious hospitality. I also want to thank Bob's grandson, Zach Hope, who's you're going to hear from a little bit later. None of this would be possible for what we're doing with the Hope family at the Hall of Fame without the support of the Bob and Dolores Charitable Foundation, and certainly Zach's support has been right there in step with them. And like I said, you'll hear from Zach in just a few minutes. Jim introduced my staff, but I'm going to do it again. Travis is our Director of Communications, sitting in the front row here, and Mary Altman is our Director of Marketing. She's actually the creative architect for the Bob Hope exhibit, and thank you for being here tonight. The first question I ask people, I have two things I'm going to talk about tonight. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame in World Golf Village in Northeast Florida, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got involved with the Hope family and how we got here tonight. So my first question that I ask people, my most favorite question, is who has visited the World Golf Hall of Fame in St. Augustine, Florida? A little show of hands. Okay, not bad. Not bad. So for those of you that have not been there, we do a little geography lesson here. We are in Northeast Florida. St. Augustine, Florida is tucked up in the very northeastern part of the state. It is just southeast of Jacksonville, and the museum is just a little north of St. Augustine proper. We are located along Interstate 95. The Hall of Fame and Museum is part of the World Golf Village, which is a fairly major resort development. It is a mixed-use development. We have 2 hotels on property. We have 2 golf courses. We have a retail and dining experience, an area. Bill Murray has his Caddyshack restaurant there, so if you're a fan of Bill, who's defending this week at Pebble Beach, I might add. For those of you that are looking perhaps to get out of the cold and snow, we have residential and retirement options, and that's the commercial for the World Golf Village. Obviously, the Hall of Fame is the centerpiece of the project. And I thought it would also be good tonight to talk a little bit about how the Hall of Fame came to be, because there's an interesting President Ford connection. For the golfers in the audience, the roots of the World Golf Hall of Famer in Pinehurst, North Carolina. It actually opened to the public in 1974, and President Ford attended, was the keynote speaker, and really kicked off the beginning of the World Golf Hall of Fame. So it's kind of an interesting full circle experience that we're here tonight talking about this. But that museum closed its doors in 1988 for a variety of reasons that I won't get into tonight. It transitioned to the PGA Tour, and Commissioner Beeman at that time picked up the baton for the museum and really rekindled the flame to create what is now the World Golf Hall of Fame. It is a nonprofit. We exist as a 501c3. Our board of directors is very, as you can imagine, very golf-centric, very global in their direction. We are governed by the chief executives of the PGA Tour. I won't go into the names. You probably know some of these names. The chief executive of the R&A in St. Andrews, Scotland. The commissioner of the LPGA, the executive director of the United States Golf Association, the PGA of America located in West Palm Beach. The European Tour, which is based in London, and the Masters has a seat on our board. So as you can imagine, we are all about golf, but it's a good group, and they keep us busy and on our toes. Jim reiterated our mission. Our mission is very simple. It is to preserve and honor the history of the game and the legacies of those who have made it great. Now, part of that mission we look for opportunities to take the message and the mission out of St. Augustine. Based on the show of hands tonight, it's a good bet that not everybody's going to get to St. Augustine and visit the Hall of Fame. So we think it's important to look for opportunities like the Ford Museum and take our message out of the state of Florida. We've done exhibits with the National Museum of Ireland in conjunction with the Ryder Cup when it was over there. We've been over in London and Scotland during the British Open. And most recently, closer to home, we were just in Palm Springs at the Humana Challenge, formerly the Bob Hope Desert Classic, and did a nice exhibit in conjunction with the Clinton Foundation. So this is sort of my segue into the relationship with the Hope family and the unveiling of tonight's exhibit. One of the strategies of the Hall of Fame is to create exhibitions which feature the members of the Hall of Fame. We've created very large-scale exhibitions with Jack Nicklaus, with Gary Player, with Arnold Palmer, with Nancy Lopez, really that not only told the story of their careers, but more importantly to us anyway, told the personal side of the individual. We're pretty sure all the golfers in the room know that Jack Nicklaus has won 18 majors, but I'm not sure everybody knows that he is the honorary chairman of the Fly Fishing Federation of America. He has a passion for that, and it's our job, we think, to tell those stories of who these people are, outside the ropes and outside of the competitive arena. So 4-ish years ago, we had an opportunity to meet with Linda Hope and present our ideas on how to keep the legacy of Bob Hope alive. Not only alive, but alive, active, and vibrant. So we had a lot of conversations. Some happened in Florida, some happened in New York, some happened where Linda lives in California. And with the blessing of Bob's wife and Zach's grandmother, Dolores, we set about creating an exhibition named Bob Hope, Shanks for the Memory. We honest to God, we were given the proverbial keys to the castle. It was quite an experience. We had a very unique opportunity to research and access the vast archive that is Bob Hope. There are warehouses in Burbank that Zach can attest to that just hold these treasure troves of artifacts, memorabilia, video, music, personal letters from presidents. We basically had carte blanche to do whatever we wanted. Now the challenge creatively to all that is how do you tell a story for someone who not only lived for 100 years but was in the public eye, entertaining for arguably 95 years of those. You can't do it in a linear fashion. It would take too long. We would still be working on it. So we decided to focus on basically 5 major storylines, which is what you'll see tonight. We focused on his early years, from his birth in England through the immigration process at Ellis Island, his westward adventure out to Hollywood, Obviously, his beloved tournament, the Desert Classic, excuse me, what he has done with the Eisenhower Medical Center out there and the Desert Charities, his unique and special relationships with 6 U.S. presidents, obviously one being President Ford, and his unwavering support of the military and his commitment to take his show on the road to entertain the troops. We focused on those, and it's interesting that golf is woven into the fabric of each and every one of those storylines. It is truly the glue that carried Bob Hope through his life, and I think the staff did a tremendous job in presenting those stories. Now the result is a 3,500 square foot exhibition that was in the museum in St. Augustine. We opened that in 2009, and during that design phase is when we started to talk with Linda about transitioning that into a major traveling exhibition, which brings us here tonight. The exhibition that is on display here tonight includes more than 150 artifacts from the Bob Hope collection. It includes Bob's Congressional Gold Medal, which was awarded by President Kennedy, his honorary Oscar, his honorary Veterans Citation given to him from Congress, which Bob called the most important honor of his life. There are a variety of themed videos with classic footage and still photography. There's a custom-designed audio tour that has more than 32 stops on the tour, and the interesting part of that is that it is predominantly in the first person, which means you're either having Bob Hope talk to you about what you're looking at, or you have a Hall of Fame member like Arnold Palmer, Gary Player, or Jack Nicklaus talking to you about what you're looking at. We were very fortunate to work with our Hall of Fame members in this exhibition, and I would encourage you to take the audio tour. Now the only mandate we were working under from Linda Hope was that this exhibit needed to be filled with laughter, and lots of it. So she said, you can do whatever you want, it needs to be fun, filled with laughter, and I gotta tell you, I think we've achieved that. When you go around there, there's probably 100 pages of text material within this exhibit, and you can spend a long time, and hopefully at the end of it, you will be smiling and have a much better appreciation for the man, Bob Hope. The exhibit will be here through the early part of the summer. It then gets shipped to London for a stay at the Greenwich Heritage Centre at the Royal Artillery Museum complex, which is just outside of London. We're siting it there to coincide with the Summer Olympics. From there, we'll go back to Palm Springs for next year's Humana Challenge. And then later on in 2013, it will go to New Orleans to the World War II Museum. So those of you that want to follow it, like the Rolling Stones or the U2, you can do that. We'll keep you appraised of that. But tonight's all about President Ford, and I want to get to Zach. It's about President Ford and the relationship that he had with Bob Hope and the relationship that Bob Hope had with President Ford. You have to have a special relationship to be able to tell the most powerful man in the world that he is also its worst golfer. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for having me tonight, and I'd like to welcome Zach Hope up to the stage. Zach?
I don't know if Jerry Ford was the worst golfer, but he did hit a couple of people. Grand Rapids. I can just hear Pop saying it. And it turns out, Travis, PR guy extraordinaire here from the World Golf Hall of Fame, and I were walking across one of the bridges this morning at about 6:15 for a TV interview. Turns out the air really is clean. And Bob Hope, whom I call Pops, opened this museum in 1981. And what he said about the clean air is the people here are so serious about keeping the air clean that he had to appear in front of the city council just to get his monologue approved. So if the air is clean, what's in the water? Seriously, you have a lot of talent here. You have an absolute all-star team on the Ford Foundation and the leadership of this museum. Elaine Didier and Jim Krantzis have been terrific hosts, and they really know a ton. I am very impressed and honored to be here to speak. I think you'll like this exhibit. In addition to the hundreds of pages of text, You'll see lots of video interactivity, iPad interactivity, video clips, audio. It's a terrific exhibit. And I can tell you that in Jack Peter, we really, the Hope family, we stumbled across serendipity because his group, and that's Travis and Mary Altman and others who are still down in St. Augustine, they know what they're doing. They're like a SWAT team in the world of golf. And this exhibit originally was going to be a one-time thing down there. And they did such a good job that they started getting requests that they loan it out. And they thought, how are we going to do this? But they did, and they broke it down, and there's really no more fitting a place than Grand Rapids. It's a kind of town where Pops, who had come up in vaudeville, thought of as his bread and butter. Because he knew that in a town like Grand Rapids, if a joke played, it would play anywhere in America. And he spent a lot of time making fun of Hollywood and Washington, D.C., and let me tell you, if a joke played there, he wasn't sure it would play anywhere else. So NBC aired that 1981 opening of the museum. Pops hosted it, and it was largely because Pops and Jerry Ford went so far back that he felt pretty comfy ribbing the president. And rib him he did. He said, behind every great man is a great woman. And for wife Betty Ford, that's a double blessing, because the way Jerry plays golf, that is the safest place to be. And about playing in Palm Springs, where Jerry Ford spent a lot of time, he said, there are a load of golf courses. And Pop said that President Ford never decides which one to play until after he's hit his first tee shot. Of course, Pops mentioned that here in Grand Rapids, there's also the Gerald R. Ford Highway. He said he knew exactly what that does without even having to look at it. It goes 200 yards straight ahead and then curves off into the woods. No, the Hopes and the Fords go back a long way, and it is really a sincere friendship between, started by two men and between families. When he took office in 1974, he asked both of my parents to serve in his administration. We moved to Washington, D.C. My father worked in the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. My mother worked on domestic policy and what was called the Domestic Council in the White House. She worked weekends. It was a busy time. She toted my sister Miranda and me along. And it was looking back on that I realized our childhood was a little bit different at times. A lot of kids, they grew up running around the swing set at a park, playground. My sister and I grew up running down the hallways of the White House playing tag, you're a commie, with Dick Cheney's kids. And for the bicentennial celebration at 4th of July, 1976, my sister and I were able to, at an age where we didn't realize the full weight of the occasion, up to the Truman balcony, 4th of July, bicentennial, to watch fireworks. Pretty special. Years later, at an age where I was able to have reflected on the impact of those days and of this critical presidency, I did have the chance to sit next to President Ford in the front seat of a golf cart in Palm Springs, the 18th green of the Bob Hope Desert Classic, as Phil Nicholson and the leaders were making their approach, no shots coming. I did have the chance to thank him for his great friendship to the family and for that early experience and for his serving as a real turning point in American history. Now, just golf buddies, Bob Hope and Jerry Ford, not just golf buddies. These are two guys who were cut from the same cloth, and they were bound by a lot more. In Pops' tours performing for the troops, Pops found, and he really did find, not only an audience that he felt strongly about, not only an audience that he would go anywhere for because he knew that they were putting their lives on the line every day, but an audience that was fantastic. I mean, he discovered an electricity in that audience that he never wanted to lose. He did his first tour in World War II, and his last atop a Humvee in the desert in Desert Storm. And that was with wife Dolores along. Pops's tradition of friendship and of golf with U.S. presidents ran a similar course. Started with Truman, took real root with Eisenhower, and lasted all the way through President Clinton. Now, of course, presidents did recognize that Pops and the association of Pops represented a unique connection to a source of patriotism around which all Americans could rally. Of course, they liked getting a few extra holes in with a guy I can tell you was a ton of fun. But in my lifetime, and in my humble opinion, I will say that there was no president with whom Pops had more in common than Gerald R. Ford. Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Cleveland, Ohio, each with a love of golf, a love of country, each with a huge heart, and some toughness when necessary, I can tell you that too, and enormously humble. The historian Richard Norton Smith, who did a eulogy for President Ford, said that one of the extraordinary things about President Ford was that he was immune to the disease that affects so many figures that come to Washington, D.C. And the disease to which he was immune was that of self-importance. And when you see a photo tonight, it's my favorite photo of Pops. It's a photo of Pops and Jerry Ford. The team at the World Golf Hall of Fame decided they'd blow that up to about 12 feet. You will see two men who are cut from the same cloth. They are looking in the distance at a shot. It's a true candid shot at someone's drive. And you can see that Pops liked having a guy who had been the center at University of Michigan and could block for him. And that Jerry Ford had the outside notion that maybe Pops could do a little blocking of his own. Of course, today it's more important than ever that President Ford's years were a turning point in American history, not just for the ending of Vietnam, but for one of the great constitutional crises that we've ever had in this country. And it all turned on that bicentennial. So it's fitting that what I've noticed, and partly because of the good work here of the folks from the World Golf Hall of Fame, and no doubt because we've had some struggles of late in these recent years in this country, that there's been a resurgence of interest in Bob Hope. And I'm glad for it, not just for Pops, because I love what he stood for. So I will say some of you will enjoy walking down memory lane, but I'd also encourage you to bring in some friends or some relatives from the youngest generation to which you have access and to show them around a little bit. They will enjoy it. As I said, with the video interactivity and the touchscreen iPads, in addition to all of the historical artifacts, they will learn a lesson in American history that I still believe is valid, and that is that in this country, you can start with next to nothing and end knowing that you have made a big, and Pops liked things that were big contribution. So, enjoy this exhibit tonight, and thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you so much. We had a wonderful conversation over dinner, and we just began to touch on some of the stories, and I hope that those of you with questions will pass them to the side. I have a few here. To start, do we have military veterans here who might have seen Bob Hope in person or had the chance to meet him? We do. I thought we would. And where was that? You want to tell us?
I was in Guadalcanal and Peleliu Island, and Bob Hope came, and even though during his thing we could hear shooting in the background, he really took a lot of chances to come and entertain us.
Anybody else? Do we have some more? We do. Sir? can pass the mic here. You want to tell us about that?
I saw Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Jerry Colonna at the racetrack in Paris, World War II.
Not performing, but at the racetrack. What a
Nobody's supposed to know about that.
Great. Okay, wonderful. How did you get started performing for the military? We asked you a little bit about that, but what drove the first performance? Did he volunteer, or did the USO come and find him?
Well, it's a good question, and of course, since Pops had been born in the UK and come over at the age of 2, a lot of people think that maybe he was trying to prove his patriotism or any number of things. As I said, the truth was that when he did a domestic base show, maybe one of the bases in California, Vandenberg, somewhere, that he found not just a cause, not just guys that he believed were doing the best work, but an electricity with that audience that he didn't find anywhere else. And so it was almost as if from moment one, it was meant to be. Pops, first and foremost, liked to get laughs. And he got some big ones there. And he thought to himself, who doesn't know about this? Holy smokes. So it went both ways. It went both ways. He benefited from you, sir, and you. Particularly if you gave him a tip on the 7-horse in the 4th race.
Here's another World War II question. During World War II, people made collections of signed dollar bills called a short snorter. The bills were taped together and rolled up to prove someone was somewhere in the world. I've heard that Bob Hope had the largest roll of all. Does the roll still exist?
You know, I don't know.
Now, there's a question for an archivist.
I haven't seen that collection, but if it's actually a roll of dollar bills, it might be in the vault.
That's true. Good
Or
point.
maybe he bet it at the racetrack that day. No, you have to, if you hire somebody like Mary Altman, who's a marketing person but also an archivist, and you ask her to go digging through some stuff, let me tell you, you want her on her side because there's a lot of dirt that she could use against me in the future.
You mentioned that your grandfather was born in England. Where in England?
Well, he was born in what's called Eltham, England, E-L-T-H-A-M, not far from London. His father was a craftsman and blue-collar guy looking for work. They moved to Cleveland. His mother was more the source of his artistic talent. She was of Welsh descent. She was a singer, and woohoo! She was a singer and a pianist, and she paid for Pops' first music lessons and dance lessons and things like that. But years later, even though some of these guys were tough as nails, they would get around the piano in Toluca Lake at the house in the San Fernando Valley in L.A., and they would sing. They might have punched some guys out the prior night, but they sang around the piano.
And how many brothers were there?
I believe there were a total of 10, so he had 9 brothers.
Wow.
9 brothers, all boys.
That's a lot of men singing around the piano. Though born in England, he came to love this country so much. What do you think was the driver in that? What was his passion for this country?
Well, I mean, first off, I would imagine that when you come over at 2, you don't remember a whole lot. Listen, he came from the wrong side of the tracks in Cleveland, and you know, in those days, on that side of the track, you did anything you could to make it. So, in addition to those experiences, of course, like a lot of good, tough guys, Pops and Grandma too lived through the Great Depression. And so the name with which he was born, which is Hope, turned out to be one that others might have chosen as a stage name. He slugged it out. He did anything to try to make it. And, you know, I don't know, some of his brothers might have run numbers on that side of the track, who knows. But he tried boxing, and one of Pops' jokes was that he got more familiar with the canvas than Van Gogh during those years. He boxed under the name Packy East. In the vaudeville circuit, he tried just about everything. And of course, there was song and dance, but there were all kinds of acts that you would otherwise see today only in circuses. You know, you would see conjoined twins. Pops tried everything. And what he finally found was emceeing, hosting shows, introducing other acts, telling a few jokes, stepping off, telling a few more jokes. Years later, when we played at state fairs, he'd tell a few jokes, want a retreat, realized he didn't have another act. He said, I want to sing. Wait a minute, a couple more jokes.
That's great. What are your memories of his favorite compatriots in performing?
Well, you know, he had so many guys with whom he just loved to improvise a little bit. And there are lots of fantastic outtakes, but there was a guy who was before my time named Jack Benny. And Pops loved Jack Benny. I mean, he was known for performing with Bing Crosby, but Jack Benny could put him in stitches at any moment's notice. Benny said one time to my grandmother, look, I can go over and make him laugh, very serious conversation, I'm going to go and make him laugh. And Dolores said, how are you going to do that? And he said, I'm going to say something like broccoli, and he's going to laugh. And he did.
Tell us more about his relationships with so many presidents. Was it just the Gulf, or was it mutual respect? He crossed parties. Talk more about that.
Well, that's another thing that nobody knows about crossing parties. No, he did, and you know, including the last president, with which he had a real relationship in office, which is Bill Clinton. You know, Pops liked things that were big. He wanted to know who was going to be big, what was going to be big. He was always paying attention to what people were buying in the supermarket because he wanted to know what products were going to be big. And one of the things that he thought was biggest was Disney. Was when he did the opening of Disneyland in the late 50s, early 60s. And he took a look at that and he said, goodness, I'm going to get involved with this. And so when Disney World opened up down in Florida, he started buying up property all around. The point is that the biggest manifestation of the U.S. would be the president. And so even though there was a lot for both parties, you know, presidents found this great association of patriotism, and Pops needed the commander-in-chief for access to this audience that he loved. But Pops liked guys who really were the best at what they did, and he loved hanging out with these guys. Very humble, very humble.
Talk more about the Disney connection and your grandfather's entrepreneurial spirit, because you spoke about that at dinner, and that was a surprise for all of us present, that was a business acumen side of Bob Hope that we don't think about.
Well, you know, somehow he would get away in a performance. You know, somebody would say that they wanted him to do a benefit somewhere, so-and-so, knowing that it was charitable, and he said, how's the money? And then he would go do the benefit for free, of course. But I think, again, coming through the Great Depression, coming from the wrong side of the tracks, never knowing where the next meal was coming from when he was going to grow up, made him very interested in how to survive. He had a lot of compassion for people who weren't making it. And he had always relied very much on writers. And at the house in Toluca Lake, writers would come by, and they would attach a rock to a piece of string, to a joke rolled up in a piece of paper, and they'd throw it across over the wall, and if Pops used it, he paid him. And he really did. Now, years later, guys maybe weren't on the staff. They could come by without a joke, and they'd say, hey, listen, I really need a couple of bucks. And he would step away from the dinner table, and he'd peel off a few bills, and he'd come back and sit down, and you knew exactly what he had just gone and done. He paid attention to to what he thought of as common sense business. And he took care of a lot of people.
Tell us more about your parents' relationship with President and Mrs. Ford. What did they enjoy most about each other?
Well, I mean, this was one of the great relationships. Pops and Grandma truly enjoyed Jerry and Betty. You know, they spent a lot of time together in Palm Springs. Betty's center was at the Eisenhower Medical Center, which had been built on land that my grandparents had donated. But just good people enjoying each other. There were plenty of relationships that were alliances. This was friends.
And tell us more about your parents' support for the building and the fundraising for the Betty Ford Clinic.
Well, I don't know the details on that. I just know that that it was very important to them. And so much so that without my grandmother asking, they ended up naming part of it the Dolores Hope Center.
Wonderful. Did you ever think about following your grandfather into show business? And we know there are some things that you've done that are kind of interesting.
Well, see, this is where the research can get you a little bit into trouble. My grandmother was the first one to betray me a little bit on this, and she said, you know, despite all the great education that we got for these kids and for the grandkids, of whom I'm one, would you believe that we can't keep them off the stage? And that was partly Pops, who put us on stage at the age of maybe 5. He needed good straight men, and when you're 5 years old, believe me, it makes for some jokes. Yeah, I did. I spent a little time doing some acting in college, and you know, my problem was lack of talent. And like Steve Ford, one of Jerry's sons, you know, I did a little soap opera acting. Tried to burn as much of that tape as possible, but don't put Mary Altman on it; she'll find it. And shot a number of shows with Roseanne on her talk show, which was quite an experience.
So you've played the straight man more than once.
I have. In this instance, the straight man was told by the host, "Zach, take your shirt off." The answer to that is yes, Roseanne.
What's your favorite family memory?
My goodness. My goodness.
I had to stump you with something.
Yeah, that is a stumper. Well, you know, Grandma Dolores was a real peacemaker, and she took my sister Miranda and me over to Ireland. She's half Irish and half Italian, and my mother's father, grandfather on the other side, who also liked the racetrack, bawled me out for some wagering that I did. He thought they were unwise wagers and that I paid attention to a tip or something. These were very small bets, but nonetheless bawled me out. And Grandma took me under her wing, and she said, "Let's go for a walk." And she did. She's a tough lady in her own right. But let me tell you, when the chips were down, she was there. Dolores Hope, beautiful woman.
What golf courses did Bob Hope most like to play? And were you ever playing with him on any of those courses?
He would take us to the range. He loved it if you could. He loved displays of prowess. If you hit the ball a ton, he wouldn't stop talking about it. But I ought to ask the golf experts here if they know some of the favorites. There are little tournaments all over the place. I mean, Jerry Ford Invitational played in Colorado. Ford lived in Beaver Creek, and I think the tournament was there in Vail. Pops' tournament was in Palm Springs at different courses. He loved a little nine-hole course called O'Donnell's in Palm Springs. It was just what he needed. It was close. Pops didn't like a lot of rigmarole of traveling around. People wondered, why would you live in Toluca Lake in San Fernando Valley when you could live in the great big house in Beverly Hills? And he was just much more down to earth than that. He said, you know, I just can't imagine being on the wrong side of the hill from the studios where I work. I mean, it's LA, what if there's traffic? He liked being equidistant between Disney and Warner Brothers and various studios, and for him, that was work, and that's what he cared about.
Talking about the exhibit, what's your favorite feature of the items that were so carefully selected? Because, you know, there are hard choices to make in planning any exhibit. We know exactly what that's like. So tell us, what's your favorite aspect of this exhibit?
Well, you know, we talk about the relationship with presidents and talk about entertaining and his tours. But there are a couple of IDs, identification cards issued by the Department of Defense that allowed him to go on those tours. And you could point to all kinds of things that gave him access, whether it was C3s that were taken, Raquel Welch and company over. But those IDs really tell the story, and there's one thing in that same case, which is a monologue of Pop's. It looks like it's maybe 15 pages or something. I believe it goes all the way back to the 1940s. And it's the unmistakable marks of a man who worked so incredibly hard on that monologue. He would try it out with you and try it out with you. You'd see what worked. If it didn't work with you and it didn't work with you, he struck it. If it worked, he'd check it. If it worked again, he'd put another check. And if he worked with some very difficult audience, he'd put a circle around it. And that circle was you knowing that it would be in the monologue. And you see those marks on those papers.
Now that drives me to ask, I hadn't thought about, did he memorize the monologues or did he use cue cards the way we're told? Please tell us the secret.
I think everybody knows he used cue cards. He really did. He really did. He had people that he liked for cue cards. And Barney McNulty, he always wanted over here on the left, because that was his go-to guy. He'd work the right. If it was confusing, he went to Barney. Always cue cards. They started out about this big, and when his eyesight started getting long, they got about the size of that photograph. It's about 12 feet.
Oh, thanks. More questions coming in. This is great. We've heard your favorite aspect of the exhibit. Is there something in the exhibit that you personally wish had been included and which was overlooked by the curatorial team?
Well, I can tell you, there's no stone unturned by the curatorial team. I grew up in those early years in LA going to Rams games, Los Angeles Rams games, with the family. And it was such a family experience for me at almost a pre-verbal letter age and level that years later, all I would have to see was the colors of the Rams, and a tear would come to my eye. Pops owned a piece of the Rams. Jerry Ford was on the board of directors of the Rams, and they were always in so much trouble that in that 1981 opening of this museum, Pops said, Jerry Ford's on the board of directors of the Rams. It won't be another week until he's a starting quarterback.
And he could have done it, too. There's a question about the breakup of the Hope Crosby team. Was that amicable?
Always amicable. I think their relationship was very much on stage and business. I don't know why that was. The wives were together all the time, and the families are friends. But he wasn't as close to being off stage as he was with some guys like Jerry Colonna, or as I mentioned, Jack Benny, any number of folks.
Okay. Question about your grandfather's full name and whether there were other nicknames you had for him other than Pops.
Other than Pops? Wow. I mean, Pops could be pretty tough. If you called him something he didn't like, he'd let you know. What the heck are you talking about? What was the first part of the question?
Just what was his full name?
Oh, well, it was Leslie Towns Hope. Leslie Towns Hope. And he had a lot of jokes about his various names, including that one of the reasons why he changed it was that in school, last name first, they called him Hopeless. And I was a pitcher in college, and Pops was proud of that. I told him one time that the trainer, who took care of pitchers who had arm trouble, was calling me No, as in no hope. And that the guy thought that was funny, and Pop said, "Listen, I've been through it. Try Packy East."
Your grandfather was given many awards. Did he have a favorite?
Interesting question. Well, I can tell you the one that he really would have liked to have won. He joked about it a lot. But that would have been an Academy Award for his acting. He won awards. He won an Academy Award. He hosted the Academy Awards more times than anyone, 19 times. Very, very Protestant on his side and Catholic on my grandmother's. But at the Academy Awards, he would say things like, "Welcome to the Academy Awards, that in our household we call Passover." He would have liked to have had one of those awards, I can tell you. He really would have liked to.
Well, maybe this answers the next question. Do you think your grandfather had any regrets over his long life? Was it just the Academy Award, or would there be other things?
Well, he was a good businessman, so we were talking a little bit at dinner tonight because it surprised people. He started to buy up some land in the San Fernando Valley, and a developer would come along and ask him, "Oh my goodness, we didn't know it then, but we know it now. That'd be great. We'd like to develop." And Pops would say, "Well, we got 20 acres there, and I bought it for nothing, and I'd be happy to swap it with you. You can build there, but I need 40 just across the road where you don't think it's so valuable." They say, "Oh my goodness, we can't build there. Here's your 40 acres, blah, blah, blah." And then a couple of years later, they come back and say, "We really like those 40 acres. Pop said, "No problem. I'll take 80 just diagonally up a couple of blocks." And that allowed him to keep building and to manage his very early on tax basis in those properties. But I'll tell you, when he parted with a piece of property that he later regretted, there was no talking to him about that. He would be very irritable. You mentioned, "What about those 80 acres that you gave up over in the valley?" "What the hell are you talking about? There wasn't 80 acres. But then he'd ask you to look into the next lot over and see if the people were still living there. Maybe we could get it back.
And we have to close with a question about your own passion for golf. Do you share your granddad's passion?
I need a lot of work on the golf. I did hit the ball pretty far and pretty straight, but my grandmother pointed out that I had a little problem with patience, and that the short game needed some improvement.
Was she a golfer too?
Yes.
Okay.
Big golfer. She loved to golf.
Oh, that's great. So they shared that. That's wonderful. That's great. Well, we want to thank you for being here. Isn't this marvelous to have such a wonderful representative? We have pens with the signature of Gerald Ford, as you know, for our honored speakers, so we hope you will use those in good health. Before we go upstairs, I want to thank the representatives of the World Golf Hall of Fame, both for the exhibit and for being here tonight. This is really wonderful. So I hope you'll all take the moment to talk with all of our guests as well as our speaker. I would like to alert you to some programs that are coming up because February is a busy month. Next Monday, February 13th, we're showing Black and Blue, which is a documentary film about Gerald Ford's relationship with Willis Ward, who was an African-American player on the 1934 University of Michigan football team, which played Georgia Tech, and Mr. Ward was benched for that game because of the feelings of the Georgia Tech team. It's a fascinating documentary. It really shows some early wonderful characteristics of President Ford, and we encourage you to come. So that's at 7 o'clock on Monday, February 13th. We will have with us the producer, Brian Kruger, and the writer, Buddy Morehouse, and also Buzz Thomas, who is the grandson of Willis Ward. He's a former state senator and a wonderful representative of the Ford family. And that was a friendship, by the way, that President Ford carried forward throughout the life that he and Willis Ward shared. Willis Ward became a judge in Detroit, very distinguished individual, a Democrat, but nonetheless Ford campaigned for him and he campaigned for Ford, so that the friendship continued from when they met in their freshman year coming at the University of Michigan. So that's Monday night at 7. The week after, on Monday the 20th, we're having the Essay Challenge Awards that Barbara McGregor will be emceeing. That's our awards for high school students who've written essays on various aspects of character or integrity. That's a very competitive process, and the awards will be given that night. And featured speaker will be Gloria Lara of the Girl Scouts. And then on February 21st, the day after, John Miller will be discussing his book, The Big Scrum, How Teddy Roosevelt Saved Football, and that's jointly sponsored with Grand Valley. So we hope to see you at some of those programs. Again, I want to thank the Ford Foundation for the support for the exhibit and for the program. We simply could not do what we do without their support. Thank you again, Joe. And if you're not a friend of Ford already, Joe will be glad to talk with you, because that's one of the ways that you can be supportive. So now feel free to go to the lobby. We have a reception. The exhibit is open upstairs, and don't miss the giant photo of President Ford with Bob Hope, and President Ford is in his signature plaid golf pants. It's not to be missed. Thank you all for coming.